Welcome to Addictive Stories. San Antonio, Texas, a Tuesday morning in October. The sun had barely come up, and the parking lot of Vantage Tech Solutions was still half empty. A man named Carlos Medina, 43 years old, was pushing his cleaning cart across the asphalt. Slow, steady steps. The same steps he had taken every morning for the past 4 years. His truck was parked near the fence. A 1968 Ford F-100, rust on the doors. Paint faded to almost nothing. One bumper held on with a wire. Most people walked past it and said nothing, or they looked away fast, the way people do when they feel embarrassed for someone else. But that morning was different. The CEO of the company, a man named Richard Holloway, walked out with 5 investors. Expensive suits, big watches, loud voices. One of them pointed at the truck. "What is that thing doing in the employee lot?" he said, laughing. Richard smiled. "Oh, that belongs to our janitor. He has been asking us to add more employee parking. Maybe now we know why." The group laughed. Carlos was standing 20 feet away. He heard every word. He did not turn around. He just reached into his pocket, felt the key, and kept walking. But something changed in him that moment. Not anger, not shame, just a quiet decision. Because what those men did not know, what nobody in that building knew, was that under the hood of that rusted truck was an engine worth more than all their suits combined. Let me tell you who Carlos Medina really is. 43 years old, born in Laredo, Texas, the third son of a mechanic. He grew up watching his father fix engines on weekends, on weeknights, on holidays. His father loved engines the way other men love music. Carlos learned early. By the time he was 14, he could take apart a carburetor and put it back together blindfolded. Not because someone taught him, because he'd paid attention. He went to college on a partial scholarship, engineering. He was one of 12 Hispanic students in his program. He was not the loudest in the room, but his professors noticed him. The quiet ones always left the deepest marks. After graduation, he worked at a mid-sized automotive company in Dallas, designing fuel systems, running tests, writing reports that sometimes got read and sometimes got filed away. He was good at his job, really good, but he was not good at office politics. He did not know how to smile at the right moment, laugh at the right joke, or make his ideas sound like someone else's idea so they would feel comfortable proving them. So his ideas kept getting rejected, not because they were bad, because they made people feel uncomfortable about what they had missed. He had a daughter named Sophia, 8 years old, loved dinosaurs, hated math, and believed her father could fix anything. That is the man who pushed the cleaning cart. That is the man they laughed at. And that is the man who was about to change everything. The truck had belonged to his father. His father, Roberto Medina, bought it used in 1982. He drove it for 30 years. Fixed it himself every time it broke, painted it twice, replaced the engine once. When Roberto died, he left Carlos 2 things, the truck and a toolbox. "Everything I know is in that box," he told Carlos the last time they spoke. "And everything I loved is in that truck. Take care of both." Carlos did, but he did more than take care of it. On the outside, the truck looked the same. Faded paint, rust spots, a crack in the windshield that spread a little more each winter. People saw it and thought, poor man's car. But under the hood, Carlos had spent 5 years building something entirely new. It started as a project to keep himself busy after his divorce. Something to do at night after Sophia went to sleep. Something to think about that was not the loneliness, not the quiet apartment, not the stack of bills on the kitchen table. He rebuilt the engine from scratch. Not restored, rebuilt. Every component designed by hand. Every part either custom-made in his garage or sourced from specialty suppliers who did not ask questions. The result was unlike anything on the market. A hybrid combustion system with regenerative efficiency, adaptive fuel mapping, and emissions output that met standards not even required yet. It was years ahead of anything being sold. And it was hidden inside a rusted 1968 truck that the CEO of a tech company just called junk. People always want to know the same thing when they hear this story. If he was that smart, why was he mopping floors? Fair question. Here's the honest answer. When his daughter Sophia was 3 years old, his wife Maria left. She did not leave because she stopped loving him. She left because she said she could not live with someone who was never fully present, always thinking about engines, always in the garage, always in his head. Carlos did not argue. He was not sure she was wrong. After the divorce, he had Sophia every other week in full custody on holidays. His engineering job required travel, sometimes 3 weeks a month, sometimes longer. He tried to make it work. He hired babysitters. He called every night from hotel rooms. He missed school plays and birthday parties and the small moments that do not seem important until you realize you have missed too many of them. Then one afternoon, Sophia called him crying. She had fallen at recess. She wanted her dad. He was in Detroit. He flew home that night. And the next morning, he quit his engineering job. He found a janitorial position at Vantage Tech Solutions within 2 weeks. Fixed schedule, no travel, done by 3 in the afternoon, which meant he could pick Sophia up from school every single day. The pay was less, much less, but he was there when she needed him. And every night, after she was asleep, he went back to the garage, back to the engine, back to the one thing that had always made sense to him. 5 years. That is how long Carlos worked on the engine. Not every night. Some nights he was too tired. Some nights Sophia had a fever, and he stayed on the couch next to her bed until morning. But most nights, after 9 o'clock, he was in the garage. He had a folding table, 3 metal shelves, and 1 good work light. The truck sat in the center. He had removed and replaced almost every part at least twice. He kept a notebook, hundreds of pages, sketches, calculations, failed experiments crossed out in red pen, successful ones circled in blue. He did not have a lab. He did not have a team. He did not have funding. What he had was patience, and a problem he could not stop thinking about. The problem was simple to state and almost impossible to solve. How do you build an engine that performs at the highest level while cutting fuel consumption and emissions in half, without making the vehicle heavier or more expensive? Every major automotive company had research teams working on this, dozens of engineers with university degrees and million-dollar budgets. Carlos had a notebook and a truck, but he also had something the research teams did not have. He had grown up watching his father solve mechanical problems with whatever was available. He had learned to think without limits. To ask, what if this does not have to work the way everyone assumes it works? That one question, was how he got somewhere they could not. Sophia was 9 years old when she finally figured out what her father did in the garage at night. She had always known he worked in there. She could hear the tools late at night when she got up for water. She could smell the motor oil in the mornings on his hands. But one Saturday, she asked to come in. Carlos hesitated. The garage was his space, his thinking room. But Sophia looked at him with that look, the one she had been using since she was 2 years old, that made it impossible to say no. He opened the door. She walked in slowly, looking at everything. The shelves of components, the notebook on the table, the truck in the center with its hood propped open. She stood on a step stool and looked at the engine for a long time. Then she said, "Papa, is this the same engine from before?" "No," Carlos said. "I built a new one." She looked at him. "Why?" He thought for a moment about how to explain it to a 9-year-old. "Because I had an idea," he said, "and I wanted to see if the idea was real." She nodded like that made complete sense. "Can I help?" she asked. From that day on, Sophia came to garage on Saturday mornings. Carlos taught her to read a schematic. She learned the names of parts. She started asking questions he had not thought to ask himself. She became his partner, and she was the reason he never gave up. To understand why Carlos was mopping floors at a tech company, you have to go back 7 years. He was working at Apex Drive Systems in Dallas. Junior engineer, 3 years in. Good reviews every year. A manager who liked him but could never remember his name at meetings. Carlos had been developing his hybrid combustion concept for about a year at that point. Just sketches and calculations at first. Then small prototypes he built on weekends. In February of that year, he put together a formal proposal. 42 pages. Data, models, projected performance numbers, cost estimates for a small batch production run. He submitted it to his department head. 3 weeks later, he got a meeting. There were 4 people in the room: his department head, a senior engineer, someone from finance, and a man from the executive team whose name Carlos did not recognize. They had read 7 pages. "The concept is interesting," the department head said, "but the cost to develop this production stage is prohibitive, and the risk profile is too high for where we are right now." Carlos asked if they could review the performance data. The finance man said, "Mr. Medina, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but decisions like this require more seniority than your current position allows for." Carlos went home that evening and sat in his car in the driveway for 20 minutes. Then he went inside, made dinner for Sophia, helped her with her homework, and after she went to sleep, went to the garage and kept building. The morning after the parking lot incident, Carlos arrived at work at his usual time, 6:45. He signed in at the security desk, nodded to the guard, and went to the supply room to get his cart. Nobody mentioned what had happened. The CEO passed him in the hallway at 8:15, made brief eye contact, looked away. The manager, who had been standing near the investors, a man named Greg, stopped by later that morning. "Hey, Carlos," he said, leaning against the wall. "About yesterday. Sorry if things got a little awkward. You know how it is with these investor visits. Optics and all that." Carlos looked at him. "Sure," he said. Greg nodded and walked away. That was the apology. Carlos went back to cleaning, but his phone was buzzing. He had received a message at 6 in the morning from a man named Daniel Rios, an automotive journalist based in Houston who had seen the truck parked outside a hardware store 2 months earlier and had asked Carlos about it. Carlos had told him very little at the time, but now Daniel was writing again. "I heard something from a contact at an automotive conference last week." The message read, "Someone named Gabriel Sandoval was describing a propulsion concept that sounds a lot like what you showed me. Are you familiar with Sandoval?" Carlos read the name twice. Gabriel Sandoval. He was familiar with that name. Very familiar. He put his phone in his pocket and finished his shift. But his mind was somewhere else entirely. Gabriel Sandoval was not a bad man. That is important to say, because this story is not about villains. Gabriel was a 47-year-old automotive engineer from Houston. Smart, ambitious, well-connected. He had spent 20 years building a reputation in the hybrid propulsion space. 5 years ago, he had left his corporate position and started his own research company, Sandoval Propulsion Labs. Small team, private funding, a lot of noise at industry conferences. The concept he had been presenting for the past 18 months was called the Adaptive Combustion Integration System. He had a sleek presentation, a prototype video, strong investor interest, and the core architecture of his system was nearly identical to Carlos Medina's, not copied, not stolen in the conventional sense. But the path of ideas is not always clean. Years ago, when Carlos had submitted his proposal at Apex Drive Systems, it had been reviewed by 4 people. Carlos never knew what happened to his documents after the meeting, but documents move, ideas travel, sometimes through conversations at conferences, sometimes through consultants who work for multiple clients, sometimes through a chain of hands so long that by the end, nobody can trace where the original thought came from. Carlos could not prove anything. What he could prove was that his notebook dated back 7 years. His prototypes were photographed and logged. His original proposal existed in digital form with a timestamp. He had never filed a patent. That was the problem. And that was about to become the most important detail in the story. The week the parking lot incident happened was also the week of Sophia's school science fair. She was in 5th grade at Riverside Elementary. The assignment was to present a working model or a documented experiment. Sophia chose to build a working model of a hybrid combustion cycle. Her father helped her. Every evening that week, they sat at the kitchen table with cardboard, colored tubing, small motors from old toy cars, and a diagram Carlos drew by hand on graph paper. The model was not perfect. It was made from things they found at the hardware store and things pulled from the garage shelves. But it worked. When Sophia explained it to her class, her teacher stopped her mid-sentence. "Where did you learn this?" the teacher asked. "My dad taught me," Sophia said. The teacher, a woman named Mrs. Castillo, had studied mechanical engineering before switching to education. She knew what she was looking at. After the fair, Mrs. Castillo asked to speak with Carlos. They sat in small plastic chairs in the hallway outside the classroom. "Mr. Medina," she said slowly, "where exactly does your daughter's model come from?" "I mean the original concept." Carlos explained briefly. His work, his notebook, the prototype in his garage. Mrs. Castillo was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you know a man named Gabriel Sandoval?" Carlos looked at her. "I know who he is," he said carefully. Mrs. Castillo reached into her bag and pulled out a conference program. Sandoval's presentation was listed on page 3. The title of his talk was almost word for word the title of Carlos's original proposal. That night, Carlos went to the garage, not to work on the engine. He went to find the notebook. He kept it on the second shelf, behind a metal box of spare fittings. A composition notebook, black cover, worn edges. He had started it 7 years ago, on a Thursday night in November, the week after the meeting at Apex Drive Systems where his idea was rejected. He opened it to the first page. The date was written in the upper right corner, November 14th. Below it, 3 words in his handwriting, "Starting from scratch." He turned the pages slowly. Every major design decision was in here. Every failed test, every correction, every moment when the idea evolved from sketch to something real. The dates were consistent. The progression was logical. Any engineer who knew the field would understand what they were reading. But a notebook is not a patent. A notebook in a garage is not automatically legal evidence. He knew that. What he also knew was that he had sent emails to himself, sometimes with sketches attached, to a friend in Chicago who had an engineering background and had offered feedback years ago, to a part supplier in Oklahoma who had helped him source 3 custom components. Those emails had timestamps. Those timestamps mattered. He sat at the folding table for a long time, looking at the notebook in his hands. Sophia appeared in the doorway in her pajamas. "Pop, are you okay?" "Yes," he said. "Come here." She sat next to him on the stool. "Something important is happening," he said. "I need to figure out the right way to handle it." Carlos called Daniel Rios the next morning. Daniel picked up on the second ring. "I was wondering when you would call," Daniel said. They met for coffee on Saturday at a diner on Commerce Street. Daniel was 40 years old, thin, with glasses and a habit of writing things down even during conversation. Carlos brought the notebook. Daniel spent 20 minutes looking through it. He asked questions slowly and carefully. He was not trying to rush the story. "Tell me about the Sandoval connection," he said. Finally, Carlos told him everything. The original proposal at Apex, the rejection, the documents he had submitted, the names of the people in that meeting room 7 years ago. Daniel typed notes. "Do you have any legal protection on this?" he asked. "No patent," Carlos said. Daniel looked up. Nothing official. But I have the notebook, photographs of every prototype stage, email records, and a parts order history with dates going back 6 years. Daniel leaned back. "Carlos," he said quietly, "Sandoval's company is currently in acquisition talks. The buyer is a major international automotive group. The valuation on his propulsion system is $1.8 billion. Carlos held his coffee cup and said nothing. "If you can establish prior development," Daniel continued, "that changes everything. Not just for you. It changes the entire deal." Carlos looked out the window. A man was walking past outside with a small child on his shoulders. "I need to think about what I want," Carlos said. "Not what I can get. What I actually want." He drove home after the coffee and sat in the truck in front of his apartment building for a while. Not the parking lot of Vantage Tech Solutions. His own block, the street where he had lived for 4 years, where Mrs. Herrera next door always left a plate of tamales on his step at Christmas, where Sophia had learned to ride her bike on the sidewalk. He thought about what Daniel had said. $1.8 billion. He could not hold that number in his mind. It did not feel real. What felt real was picking Sophia up from school every afternoon, walking home and listening to her talk about her friends, her teachers, the books she was reading, making dinner together on Thursdays because she had decided Thursday was cooking night. What felt real was the engine, not the money, the engine. The years of quiet work after everyone went to sleep. He had not built it for recognition. He had not built it for money. He had built it because the problem was real and the solution worked, and he needed to know if the idea in his head could exist in the physical world. It could. He had proven that. But he also knew that Gabriel Sandoval was about to close a deal worth nearly $2 billion using an architecture that had started in a garage in San Antonio. And the man who built it in that garage could not afford a lawyer. He went upstairs. Sophia was doing homework at the kitchen table. "Papa," she said without looking up, "there's a message on your phone from someone named Reeves." He looked at the screen. Linda Reeves, CEO of Vantage Tech Solutions. She had left a voicemail. Carlos played the voicemail twice. Linda Reeves had a calm, measured voice. The kind of voice that had been in a lot of difficult meetings. "Mr. Medina, this is Linda Reeves. I am calling because I owe you an apology for what happened in the parking lot this week. I also need to speak with you about something that may be of mutual importance. I would appreciate it if you could return my call at your convenience." Carlos put the phone down and looked at the ceiling. Then he called her back. She answered immediately. "Thank you for calling," she said. "I want to start by saying what happened in the parking lot was disrespectful, and I am sorry. That is separate from everything else I want to say." "Okay," Carlos said. "I had a conversation today with Dr. Patricia Shun, a propulsion engineer who works with our technology investment team. She saw something at an industry conference last month that she has been researching since then. She believes the Sandoval propulsion system may have earlier origins than its public documentation suggests. And she believed those origins may be connected to you." Carlos was quiet. "We would like to meet with you," Linda said. "In person. I want you to bring whatever documentation you have. And I want to be clear that this conversation is entirely on your terms. You owe us nothing. We are asking for the opportunity to help." "Why would you want to help me?" Carlos asked. A pause. "Because it is the right thing to do," she said. "And because we made a mistake about who you are." Dr. Patricia Shun was 51 years old. She had a doctorate in mechanical engineering from the University of Michigan and 22 years of experience in automotive propulsion systems. She had spent the last 6 years working as a technology evaluator for investment firms, the kind of person who tells a company whether a system actually works before they spend $1 billion on it. At a conference in Austin 6 weeks ago, she had watched Gabriel Sandoval's presentation and felt something she could not immediately explain. Familiarity. Not the kind you feel when you see something you like. The kind you feel when you see something you have seen before. She had gone back to her hotel room that night and pulled up every paper, every patent filing, every conference talk she could find related to the specific combustion integration method Sandoval had presented. Nothing matched exactly, but something was close. A short discussion paper submitted to an internal engineering journal at Apex Drive Systems 7 years ago, never published, filed and forgotten. She had reviewed it once, briefly, years ago and had not thought about it since. The author was listed as C. Medina. She requested the full document through her professional contacts. It took 3 weeks to arrive. When she read it 3 times. Then she called Linda Reeves, who she knew from a conference 2 years back. "I found something," Patricia told her. "And if I am right, there's a janitor at your company who is about to get very, very busy." They met on a Sunday morning at the Vantage Tech Solutions building. The parking lot was empty except for 3 cars. Carlos arrived in the truck. He brought the notebook. He brought printed copies of his emails. He brought a folder with the parts order history, organized by date, going back to the beginning. Linda Reeves, Dr. Patricia Shun, and a company attorney named Marcus Webb were waiting in the conference room. Carlos sat down. He did not apologize for the truck. He did not explain himself. Patricia placed the Apex internal paper on the table. "Is this yours?" she asked. "Yes," Carlos said. "And the notebook?" He slid it across the table. She went through it slowly, the way a real engineer reads. Not skimming, actually reading, stopping, going back. After 40 minutes, she looked up. "The core architecture in Sandoval's system," she said carefully, "is derived from the design in this notebook. I cannot say with certainty how, but the progression of ideas matches in a way that cannot be coincidental. Linda looked at Carlos. "Would you be willing to show us the engine?" They walked to the parking lot. Carlos opened the hood. Patricia leaned in. She did not speak for a long time. She touched nothing. She just looked. Then she said quietly, to no one in particular, "This is real." Linda stood back. She looked at Carlos. Then she looked at the truck. And for the first time, she saw it differently. After the meeting, Carlos sat in the truck for a while before driving home. Patricia had given him her honest assessment. He had strong documentation. The timeline was clear. The architecture match was documented and defensible. But a patent challenge against a company with lawyers and investors and 18 months of public momentum was not a short process. It was not guaranteed, and it was not free. Marcus Webb, the attorney, had told him plainly, "We can provide full legal support at no cost to you. If we succeed, we would want a partnership agreement, a reasonable licensing arrangement, nothing that takes control away from you." Carlos had asked for 48 hours to decide. He drove home, picked Sophia up from a friend's house. They walked to the taco stand on the corner for dinner. Sophia ordered the same thing she always ordered. He looked at her across the small table. "I need to ask you something," he said. "Okay," she said, eating. "Things might get complicated for a while. People might want to talk to me. There might be a legal process. It could take months." Sophia looked up. "About the engine?" "Yes." "Is someone trying to take credit for it?" He paused. "It is complicated." She put down her taco. "Papa," she said, "you built that engine. I know it. Don't let someone else have it." He looked at his daughter, 10 years old, absolutely certain. He called Marcus Webb the next morning. "I am in," he said, "but I have conditions." Marcus Webb had a notepad ready. Carlos spoke slowly and clearly. "First," he said, "my schedule does not change. I work my current hours. I pick up my daughter from school every afternoon. No exceptions for meetings or press events." "Understood," Marcus said. "Second, I retain full creative and technical control over the engine design. No committee overrides. No executive approvals required for engineering decisions. I am the engineer of record on everything that comes from this. That can be arranged. Third, my daughter gets a full academic scholarship to any university she chooses. Engineering, medicine, whatever she decides. That is guaranteed in writing before anything else happens." There was a pause on the other end. "That is a significant ask," Marcus said. "I know what I am offering," Carlos said, "and I know what it is worth. That is fair exchange." Another pause. "Fourth," Carlos continued, "Vantage commits to a formal respect policy for all employees. Every employee, the maintenance staff, the security team, the cafeteria workers. No one gets spoken to the way I was spoken to in that parking lot. That goes into the employment culture documentation. Mr. Medina, that one is not negotiable," Carlos said. "That one matters most." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I will present this to Linda this afternoon," he said. "I think she will agree to all of it. Tell her to start with the last one," Carlos said. "If she hesitates on that, the rest does not matter." The filing was submitted on a Wednesday. Carlos's documentation was thorough. The original Apex Drive Systems internal paper, dated and on record. The notebook, authenticated by a forensic document examiner. The email chain with his friend in Chicago, spanning 4 years of technical discussion. The parts order history, verified through supplier records. Patricia Shunn provided an expert technical declaration. 14 pages comparing the architecture of Carlos's original design and the Sandoval propulsion system. Her conclusion was clear. The core innovation was the same. The evolution of the design followed the same logical path. Sandoval's legal team responded quickly, strongly worded. They called the claim baseless. They said their development had been independent. They said Carlos's notebook was not verifiable. But Carlos had one thing they had not expected. The part supplier in Oklahoma, a man named Earl Tompkins, 67 years old, who had been making specialty components for independent engineers for 30 years. He had records of every order he had ever filled. He kept them in a filing cabinet with handwritten labels. Earl's records showed Carlos had ordered a specific custom component, the adaptive fuel mapping regulator, in the second year of his development, a component that did not appear in any commercial automotive system until Sandoval introduced it 3 years later. That component, in that timeline, was the anchor. Patricia called Carlos after reviewing the supplier records. "Carlos," she said, "I think we have them." Daniel Rios published his article on a Thursday. He had sat on the story for 3 weeks while the legal process moved forward. He had been patient and careful. His editor had been nervous, but trusted him. The headline was simple: "The janitor who built a billion-dollar engine in his garage." By noon, it had 100,000 views. By 6 in the evening, it had 3 million. By the next morning, it was on the front page of 2 national newspapers, 3 major automotive industry publications, and the homepage of a large engineering news network. The story had everything: a single father, a rusted truck, 5 years of quiet work after everyone went asleep, a daughter who helped on Saturday mornings, a rejection 7 years ago that turned into the most valuable propulsion concept in the current market. People shared it because it felt true, not the kind of true that means it happened, though it did happen. The kind of true that means it touches something real about how the world works, how invisible people carry enormous things, how institutions miss what they cannot categorize. The comments were full of people who recognized something of themselves in Carlos. People who had been told their idea was too risky. People who had changed their life for their children. People who had kept building anyway, in the quiet hours when nobody was watching. Carlos did not read the article. He was at Sophia's soccer practice. The week after the article came out, something happened at Vantage Tech Solutions that nobody had planned. The maintenance staff started talking, not to reporters, not to each other in the way people vent, but openly at the staff meeting that Linda Reeves had called specifically to address what had happened. A woman named Rosa, 60 years old, who had cleaned the executive floor for 11 years, stood up. "I am glad about what happened with Carlos," she said, "but I want to say something. This has been happening for a long time, not just to Carlos. To all of us, we are invisible. People walk past us like we are not there. And that is not just here. That is everywhere." The room was quiet. Another man, Jorge, who worked in the mailroom, said, "I have an engineering degree from Mexico. It does not transfer here without going through a long certification process. I cannot afford the time or the money, so I deliver packages. And that is fine, but people treat me like I am nothing." Linda Reeves listened to every word. At the end, she said, "I owe this team an apology, not just for what happened with Carlos, for years of not paying attention." She announced a new internal policy that afternoon: mandatory respect training for all leadership, a formal internal process for employees to submit technical ideas, a review board that included representatives from every level of the company. It was a beginning, not a complete fix, but a beginning. The legal process moved faster than anyone expected. Sandoval's legal team had been aggressive at first, but the evidence was stacking up in a way that was becoming difficult to dismiss. Earl Tompkins' supplier records were bulletproof. Patricia Shunn's technical declaration was detailed and credible. The email chain between Carlos and his Chicago contact showed a continuous, documented development process spanning 4 years before Sandoval's first public presentation. More importantly, a former consultant who had worked at both Apex Drive Systems and Sandoval Propulsion Labs came forward voluntarily. He did not make accusations. He simply stated the timeline of what he had worked on and when. That was enough. Sandoval's lawyers requested a settlement conference. The negotiation took 2 weeks. In the end, Sandoval's company acknowledged Carlos Medina as the original developer of the core combustion integration architecture. They paid a licensing settlement. They agreed to credit Carlos's prior development in all future documentation. The settlement amount was not disclosed publicly, but Patricia Shunn, who was present for part of the process, told Daniel Rios privately, he will not need to worry about Sophia's future. Carlos read the final agreement carefully, 3 times. Then he signed it. He drove home in the truck. Same faded paint. Same crack in the windshield. He picked Sophia up from school. She climbed in and looked at him. Did it work out? She asked. Yes, he said. Good, she said. Can we get tacos? 2 weeks after the settlement, Linda Reeves called Carlos into her office. This time it was not a voicemail. She was waiting at the front door when he arrived for his shift. Come upstairs, she said. Please. In the conference room, Patricia Shunn was there along with the head of technology development. There was a single sheet of paper on the table. We would like to offer you a position, Linda said. Director of Propulsion Innovation. Full salary, full benefits, a research budget, and a team. Carlos looked at the paper. The hours, he said. 9 to 3, Monday through Friday, Linda said. We talked about this. Sophia comes first. Always. Carlos read the offer carefully. I want one thing added, he said. Name it. I want a formal mentorship program for employees who have technical backgrounds that are not being used in their current roles. Funded, structured, real, not a bulletin board flyer. Linda looked at Patricia. Patricia nodded. Done, Linda said. Carlos signed the paper. He went down to the supply room to return his cleaning cart. He thanked Rose and Jorge and the 3 other members of the maintenance team. He shook each of their hands. You are not leaving us, Rosa said. She was smiling, but there were tears in her eyes. No, Carlos said. I am just moving to a different floor. He took the elevator upstairs. For the first time in 4 years, he was doing engineering work inside a building. It felt, he realized, exactly like he remembered it. Linda Reeves gave a speech at the company's annual gathering 6 months after everything happened. She did not prepare it in advance. She did not have notes. She stood in front of 400 employees and said what she actually thought. 6 months ago, I stood in a parking lot and I laughed at a man's truck. I laughed because it looked old and out of place. I laughed because I thought I understood what I was seeing. I was wrong. She paused. That man had built something in his garage that our entire research division had not been able to develop. He had done in his spare time, after his daughter went to sleep, over 5 years, with no budget and no team. And we had no idea, because we never looked. The room was quiet. I want to tell you what I learned, not what we put in the company values document. What I actually learned. She looked out at the crowd. Potential does not wear a uniform. Talent does not come with a title. And the most important ideas in this company might be sitting in the mind of someone we've been walking past every morning without saying hello. She looked toward the side of the room, where Carlos was standing. I am grateful that we got a second chance, she said. I did not plan to need a third one. The room applauded. Carlos stood quietly and nodded once. Later, Sophia would watch the video of the speech on her tablet and say, Papa, she got it right. Yes, Carlos said. She did. 8 months after the settlement, the first production vehicle using Carlos Medina's combustion integration system rolled off an assembly line in San Antonio. The partnership between Vantage Tech Solutions and a major automotive manufacturer had moved quickly once the legal dust cleared. Patricia Shunn had stayed involved as the lead technical evaluator. She said it was the most efficient development to production process she had seen in 20 years. The engine performed exactly as the notebook had predicted. Fuel efficiency improved by 41% over comparable existing systems. Emissions were reduced by more than half. The durability testing showed no significant degradation after simulated high mileage cycles. The vehicle was not expensive. That had been Carlos's one non-negotiable technical requirement. This needs to be something a family in Laredo can afford, he told the production team. Not a luxury option, a real option. They listened. The launch event was held at the assembly plant. Linda Reeves was there. Patricia Shunn was there. Daniel Rios was there with his notebook. Carlos stood on the floor of the plant and watched the first vehicle come off the line. It was silver, practical looking, nothing flashy. He walked up to it and put his hand on the hood. Sophia was standing next to him. How does it feel? She asked. He thought about the garage, the work light, the folding table, the notebook, like something that was always real. He said, finally being seen. 3 months after the vehicle launch, the San Antonio Science and Technology Museum opened an exhibit on local innovation. Carlos's original engine prototype was on display. The notebook was open under glass to a page from the second year of development, a drawing of the adaptive fuel mapping system with handwritten notes in the margins. The plaque read, "The Medina Combustion Integration System, developed independently by Carlos Medina over 5 years in a residential garage in San Antonio, Texas. Now in production." Carlos took Sophia on a Saturday morning. They walked through the exhibit slowly. Sophia read every sign. She looked at the prototype the way she used to look at it in the garage, like she was seeing something other people could not quite see yet. Near the exit, a young man approached. He was maybe 22, wearing a community college hoodie. He looked nervous. "Excuse me," he said. "Are you Carlos Medina?" "Yes," Carlos said. "I read about you," the young man said. "I am studying mechanical engineering at night. I work at a warehouse during the day. People tell me it is not realistic, that it will take too long, that I should just focus on what I already have." Carlos looked at him. "What is your name?" he asked. "Marco," the young man said. "Marco," Carlos said. "Keep going. Do not ask for permission. Build what you believe in, even if you build it in a corner of your bedroom. The people telling you it is not realistic are just people who stopped." Marco nodded slowly. He looked like someone who had needed exactly that. After everything that happened, people kept asking Carlos the same question. "Are you going to restore the truck now?" He understood why they asked. He had money now. Real money. The settlement, the new salary, the partnership terms. He could have the truck repainted, rebuilt, made to look like something a magazine would photograph. But he did not want that. The truck was his father's. And his father had not cared about appearance either. Roberto Medina had always said the same thing when Carlos asked him why he did not repaint the old vehicles at his shop. "When a car works right, you can feel it," Roberto used to say. "You don't need to see it. You just know." The rust on the doors meant something. The faded paint meant something. Not as a lesson for other people, as a memory for Carlos. Every morning when he walked to that truck, he remembered his father. He remembered the garage. He remembered the nights when he was so tired he almost stopped. And he remembered that he did not stop. Sophia had asked him once, shortly after the settlement, if he was going to buy a new truck. He said no. She said, "Good, I like this one." He asked her why. "Because I know what is inside it," she said. "And that is better than how it looks on the outside." He looked at his daughter, 10 years old. She already understood something that had taken him most of his life to hold on to. The call from Apex Drive Systems came on a Monday afternoon. A man named Stuart Graves, Vice President of Innovation, introduced himself and said they were calling to express how much they admire Carlos's development and to extend a formal apology for the way his proposal had been handled 7 years ago. Then he said they had a position available: Chief Innovation Officer, unlimited development budget, full team, a chance to build what he had always wanted inside a major company structure. Carlos listened to the full offer. Then he said, "Thank you for calling." A pause. "Is that a yes?" Stuart said, "No." Carlos said, "It is a polite no." Stuart was quiet for a moment. "May I ask why?" "Because 7 years ago, for people sat in a room with my proposal and decided in 45 minutes that it was not worth pursuing. They never asked me to explain further. They never looked at the data. They just decided and moved on." He paused. "I do not hold that against anyone personally. People make decisions based on what they can see at the time. But I am not going to build the most important work of my career inside an institution that has already told me what it thinks my ideas are worth." Sophia was at the kitchen table when he hung up. She had heard the conversation. "Was that bad news?" she asked. "No," Carlos said. "It was actually a very nice call." "But you said no to something?" "Yes." "Good," Sophia said, and went back to her homework. The night after the museum visit, Carlos sat at the kitchen table after Sophia was asleep and wrote her a letter. He did it by hand, on a sheet of plain paper. He did not know exactly why, but it felt like the right thing to do. He started by telling her about his father, about the garage in Laredo, about how Roberto Medina had taught him that the inside of something tells you more than the outside ever will. He told her about the night he had sat in the Apex meeting room and felt invisible, and how he had decided that night, driving home, that he was going to build the engine anyway, not to prove anyone wrong, just to see it exist. He told her that the years of quiet work in the garage, the years she slept 10 feet away while he stayed up figuring out adaptive fuel maps and regenerative cycles, those years had not been about the engine. They had been about her, about showing her, without explaining it, that good work done in private is still good work. That consistency matters more than applause. That the people who keep going when nobody is watching are the people who eventually have something real to show. He wrote, "You asked me why I kept building even when they said no. The honest answer is that I built it for the same reason I do everything, because I wanted you to see what is possible, not what someone else says is possible. What is actually possible if you do not stop." He folded the letter and put it under her school books. She found it 2 days later. She kept it in the notebook she carried to school. 1 year after Carlos joined Vantage Tech Solutions as Director of Propulsion Innovation, the employee mentorship program he had asked for as a condition of signing launched officially. It was called the Baseline Program. The name was Carlos's idea, because everyone starts at a baseline, he explained at the launch event, and where you start is not where you finish. In the first 12 months, 41 employees enrolled. 23 of them had technical or professional backgrounds in fields unrelated to their current positions at the company. An accountant who had a background in material science. A security guard with 2 years of incomplete electrical engineering training. A woman in the billing department who had a degree in computer programming from a university in Guatemala. Carlos did not run the program himself. He hired a program director and stayed involved as an advisor, but he showed up to every cohort kickoff. He always said the same thing. "I am not here to tell you that your story will go the way mine went. It might not. Most paths are quieter than the one I took. But I want you to know that the work you do in private, the skill you practice without recognition, the idea you carry around that nobody has asked you about yet, that work is real. It counts. And we want to know about it." At the end of the first year, 3 employees from the program moved into technical roles more aligned with their actual backgrounds. Rosa, from the maintenance team, enrolled. She was studying for a facilities management certification. Carlos helped her practice for the written exam on Tuesday evenings. That is the story of Carlos Medina, a man who pushed a cleaning cart in the morning and built a $2 billion engine at night. A man who made decisions based on what his daughter needed, not what the world expected of him. A man who kept going when the going had no audience. I want to close with the thing that made this story matter to so many people. It was not the money. It was not the legal victory. It was not the parking lot moment. It was this. Carlos never needed anyone to believe in him to keep going. He had the notebook. He had the garage. He had Sophia. And he had enough faith in his own work to keep building it in the dark. That is the part people recognized. That is why millions of people read Daniel Rios' article and felt something specific in their chest. Because most of us have something we are building quietly. Something we believe in that the world has not validated yet. Something we keep returning to even when the hours are short and the doubts are loud. Carlos's story says, that is enough to keep going. You do not need permission. You do not need applause. You just need to not stop. The truck is still parked outside his apartment building. Same rust, same faded paint, same crack in the windshield. Under the hood, an engine that changed an industry. If that story moved you, if it reminded you of something you are carrying quietly, subscribe to Addictive Stories. We are here every week with stories like this one. Real, human, and worth your time. See you next week.